But
There's a sex scene later on, but it's not even interactive. There's
Yeah.
a sex scene at the end of the game. but it's
So-
not
Yeah, I think that's the
interactive.
one I.
that's the one you saw.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that scene at the end of the game, apparently the character was kind of Barbie-fied. It was like the character models changed, so it was the same, but there were no nipples on it.
Yeah, that's not good.
And it was, maybe that's why you remember nudity but don't at the same
Yeah,
time.
no, I played through the guitar scene, I remember, which was difficult.
You mean this scene?
The previous scene, but I was taking choices that did not lead to the bedroom.
I see.
And I felt kind of relieved about that, because the idea of going through the little Simon game with sex, which is what I was expecting, and it sounded too pathetic.
You're like, I have to do this for 45 minutes. So it's kind of interesting that, unfortunately I don't, I only have a video of this, I don't have a game saved here. I really wonder what happens if you screw that part up. Right? Like what happens if when you're supposed to like move the analog, you just don't do anything. I'm actually very curious to
Did the YouTube video prompt you to like enter your birth date or anything? Or?
No, this one didn't. Yeah, it didn't. It was just kind of like, yeah, this is like totally fine, which is also interesting. So anyway, how was that? Good? Great. Great. No, but I mean just in terms of sexual explicitness. I mean, does the AL rating sound sound right for that? I mean, it was fairly explicit.
I thought it was more explicit than anything in Heavy Rain, actually, like considering. Because they don't show the full nudity when they have the sex scene in that game.
In Heavy Rain.
Yeah, in Heavy Rain. So in some ways it's more, I guess, it looks more sexual, and you can sort of tell that it's more sexual,
In this game.
even if it
They're not
even if
pretending
it's
to be apologetic about it.
yeah, it's like PS2 polygons, but you can still
Like, yeah. There's this thing, and it's interesting if you like actually like read the the kind of laws for like what you can actually show and how sex works in movies. It's kind of like you get like so many thrusts before it's NC-17.
Whose job is to count those?
The people at MPAA.
There's
That's
a
an
movie
interesting parallel too, because this game was threatened with the kiss of death of the adults only, and that's the same. Movies are the same threat, and that just happened. There was a controversy with the movie Blue Valentine because it shows oral sex, and it was like strapped with an AO rating all of a sudden, or sorry, an NC-17 rating all of a sudden, and now I think is it actually non for Best Picture? I think it might be.
But is it R? It's R. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's R now. They changed it. They put a big stink.
They changed it without changing the movie, so they appealed
I
and
think
got
so. Yeah, I
the
think
rating
they
they wanted.
changed.
Yeah, and there really isn't. There's barely any full frontal nudity in the scene that they're actually describing. Everything is done from the side, and yeah, I don't find it. There's definitely been a lot harder scenes.
It's interesting too. I was watching a documentary recently also about the Hollywood rating system. There was a filmmaker who was saying that Hollywood is really afraid of penises, and that if you have a penis, he said if you have a penis on screen, you get only a precious few seconds with that penis, so you better make it count. And but like if it's an erect penis versus a flaccid penis,
Right.
it's like if it's erect, no. Absolutely not. Even though they were just having sex, and you're like, well, okay, but how are you just having sex? If but like it's just like no, you can't have it in the movie.
Your Watchmen made out pretty well.
Oh, Watchmen, sure. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of CG. Yeah.
If they're blue, it's okay.
It's
So,
glowing.
but do you
Divorces
actually
from the
interact
reality.
in that scene?
You do interact. You have to push.
You have to push?
God damn it! Yeah, you got.
It would be interesting to play, like, just to see how, how you play it.
I think that's an important
What
point
happens
actually,
if
because
it
when you hear the talking conservative heads who are complaining about like the things that are affecting our kids in games, they're always talking about what you can do. It's less about what's depicted.
But
It's
this
always
is-
about
this is the other
you
thing.
can pick up hookers and
Yeah.
you can have
Well,
sex.
the reason typically the reason that gets put around a lot for why something that in a film would garner a lesser rating in a game should garner a higher rating is because it's interactive, and people are like, it's interactive, oh my goodness, so it's worse somehow. So what is PG-13 in a movie when it's interactive sort of becomes R, even though the visual representation is almost identical. What's interesting about this is that it's interesting that when people talk about games like this, they make it, they make it sound as if they're promoting promiscuity and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, for me, if they did, that would even be fine. But in the case of this game, it's just funny that a lot of the games that actually feature sex, and we'll see this later with stuff like Dragon Age, is they're actually very kind of you really have to talk to somebody for a long time. You have to get to know them. It's not like you're running out in the street and having sex with somebody. It's like there's this character who you've gotten to know for like 10 hours of the game, and you have many conversations with them, and you've had dinner with them. And it's kind of
It's like Mass Effect.
yeah, it's like Mass Effect. It's not. It's like the games are kind of like very. They're not even promoting casual sex, or not even depicting it.
Has anyone played out of interest the God of War sex scene?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, what happens when you fail that?
They get disappointed.
Yeah, they look disappointed and you have to start
It's
over.
and then you get no reward.
Yeah.
What is your reward?
Red
Reward.
Soul.
Experience. Sex isn't the reward.
The same thing you get for killing enemies.
The first time you do it, you get a flood of experience points.
Now, am I wrong? Somebody was saying earlier that if you have sex for too long with the girls in that game, you can kill them.
Yeah, you can.
Wow, what is that like? They just
No,
die?
it's just
Do they just go
disappear.
boom and just kind of like fall over, and the game's like, good job? Or like, what is it?
No, they just disappear, and that's it.
They disappear? They're like
Yeah,
jet.
it's just-
If you have sex with me here, I will become more powerful.
More powerful.
Imagine.
Possibly imagine. So yeah, they come back later as the last boss. You answered me too much.
And then they become completely useless.
So it sounds like people. Yeah, I mean, like, is this M to you, or is this worse?
It's M.
I would say,
It's M to you.
if not for like the hypocrisy between sort of like what a movie is allowed to see versus what a game is allowed to see, if it wasn't for that, then it seems like there's nothing in here that I wouldn't see even in a PG-13 movie. There are plenty of
Really though, like totally
With the
full
sex
naked
No,
people,
full nude,
like,
get it
like,
on.
like actual thrusting.
You see no frontal nudity, but both people are fully nude and there is a sex act.
Yeah,
So that to me is an argument.
it's a French game, by the way. So you know.
Yeah,
Like if they threw a blanket over
But
it,
of course.
call it PG-13.
yeah, if they threw a blanket over
They threw a
it.
blanket over it.
It'd be a soap opera.
Yeah, it would be television.
I'll try that with violence next time.
Throw a blanket over
Yeah,
it.
so like, we're gonna saw his head off, but it's under a blanket. But okay, so that's it. But it does sound. Does anybody totally like buy the AO rating for this? Or I mean, if so, that's fine. I mean, I don't want to,
I see.
You think?
I don't think it's totally ridiculous.
You don't
It's
think
not
it's
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's not ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous.
I don't think it's ridiculous.
Okay. And it is funny too that there's kind of a one of the controversies about these rating systems is that the ratings for AO and NC-17 wouldn't be so bad if there weren't this larger problem, which is that if things are rated those, normal distributors won't carry them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so the whole reason NC-17 is NC-17 and not X anymore is because originally it was supposed to be something that was a legitimate rating, that they would have movies that, I mean, there was even a movie that won Best Picture in 1969.
9. Midnight Cowboy.
Midnight Cowboy was rated X. But today, that film would not be shown. If it was, and then of course to get rid of that stigma, they changed it to NC-17, but then it didn't really work.
The stigma just transferred.
The stigma just transferred over, so there's kind of like, there's this, they keep trying to outrun this problem, but it doesn't really seem to work. And games have just inherited it full on. But
I'm kind of curious about, and I don't think there are any good examples of it, at least I can't think of it, but like sexual reproduction. Right? I mean, like, all of these are talking about
Pokemon.
About, well, is that how they do it? I thought they just spawned out of a sphere or something. But no, I mean, most of these are examples of just sex as pleasure act. But I mean, what if those two people in Indigo Prophecy were trying to conceive a baby? Would that all of a sudden change the rating? Right? I mean, all of a sudden, is it an educational tool for teaching 7th graders about,
Are they married?
Right. Yeah. But they're married. It's going to be, by all other rules. I mean, I'm curious about that. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of human sexual reproduction in games.
you have stuff like that, and one of the things actually that I'm not showing here is The Sims. And you do have that in The Sims.
Right.
But
Oh, you talk about the downloaded patch or?
well, but this is actually really interesting. So, The Sims, for people who know The Sims, people know that in The Sims you don't see the sex. They just kind of like get under the covers and kind of roll around, and it's like that, but with the covers on. So,
Yeah, if you put on the covers, it's PG-13.
and it's PG-13 because you put on the covers. But there are babies in that game, so there's more of like there's a social, biological, economic, whatever simulation going on there. But yeah, that is different. But it also doesn't depict it the same way.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just kind of like, you know, you didn't press the button at the right moment, so therefore you're an advocate because, you know, you totally screwed it up. It would be really embarrassing. But just for contrast, this is the next game by Quantic Dream. This is Heavy Rain, which is very similar, but more polygons, less sex.
Still pretty
Really? Wow.
I failed this.
You did.
You failed it?
How traumatic.
No, but how do you fail that?
I mean, I didn't kiss him.
You chose not to.
At that exact moment, he's just like super stressing out about his son who's getting out, and I'm like, no, don't have sex now. You gotta save your son. What are you doing? I can't stop it.
Well, no, you should have sex to have another son, and then you don't need the son.
So actually, I read this really great. I was really reading a really great review
Of
this
this,
game.
of Heavy Rain.
Yeah, and the person was saying something about the movie Commando with Arnold, where this freaking guy. Anyways, and how I guess there was supposed to be a sex scene in this movie Commando. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie. He goes around killing a bunch of guys because they kidnapped his
But
daughter.
there's a girl in the movie that he doesn't have sex with,
Yeah,
and it's confusing.
He doesn't have sex with her because Arnold said, if I have sex with her in the middle of a movie where I'm trying to save my daughter, it's going to make me look like a huge asshole. So if Arnold can tell that, you know, that...
You're saying this guy
then
should.
maybe they should have...
Yeah, that's what I know.
I mean, they would choose whatever.
So he had just broken
You
like,
can't
a couple
choose whether or not.
ribs in my game, and I was like, I don't think you're fit for this.
Yeah, so he's got, yeah, he looks like...
Just needs
Oh, it's
some
the
sunshine
one I have.
and
Wow.
flowers.
This one's gonna die tomorrow?
But you have to do...
The reason it's called heavy rain is that every inch of rain that's gathering on the ground right now is more time than your son is about to die.
Oh.
Sorry for the spoiler.
No, that's.
Is it a constant heavy rain?
So what is-
Periods of heavy
what
rain?
is-
So,
what is
I mean,
a-
in the game, it's like, oh, there's this much.
Do you guys know what those controller actions mean? Like when it's kind of doing...
Yeah.
No, but what is he doing in the
Well,
game,
it
though?
was interactive undressing.
Is it like the dressing?
I would
I think
assume
it's
it
like
was
later.
watching.
It's
like-
Oh yeah, it's the taking off the clothes and stuff.
There's frontal nudity here. Huh.
It'd be funny if...
She has a lot of frontal nudity.
It would be funny if... you
More than
didn't-
this scene.
More than the same. Yeah. That's one of the
Now-
many problems.
Now, if you don't take off the clothes, if you fail, for example, with the bra, does it just stay on, or does the sex scene stop? For those of you who know.
I'm pretty sure.
You retry.
Yeah, it's with most actions like that. You just like
The
it
scene,
just,
the whole
like,
scene
screws up
stops.
and it stops and it lets you.
Oh, it's over. Right.
So in this case, the interactivity, the last bit of interactivity was undressing. There weren't any icons after that.
In other words, yeah. So in this case, the interactivity is in the undressing. And would you say that was a lot less explicit than the previous one? No.
That was a lot less explicit, but it was a lot more interactive. And you can make the argument that there was way more interactive sex there if you say, well, you know, it's interactive foreplay for that entire thing, and that's part of sex. And you're there, and you have to control it for this entire thing, which is different than Fahrenheit, where you're just pressing a button in rhythm a couple times.
So
and you're done.
in other words, like in Fahrenheit, the cutscene is well, there's no foreplay, is there?
I didn't.
The guitar?
I haven't played either.
The guitar is the foreplay.
That's a good point.
There are more polygons, but the animation is also better.
Sure.
It's more fluid.
I mean, it would, you know, maybe we'd be less bothered if they were better directed cutscenes, interactive or not. Like that's part of the problem too. Is like I mean that was like a cheesy like sex scene. Like if I saw that in a movie, I'd be like, this is a
What's
is
an
a
awesome
lousy
sex scene to you, just for comparison?
For comparison, I don't know. Shakespeare in Love had nice sex scenes, but it had dialogue that was going on during it, right? That
So
was
if they were
cool.
speaking
I mean, there's
Shakespeare-
lots of good movies with good sex scenes in it, right? I mean, this is just like you know, 2 a.m. on Cinemax. You know, thanks for putting that in my game.
It is more to compare it though to Fahrenheit or Indigo Prophecy or whatever. It's more maybe sexy is the wrong word that I shouldn't be using,
Kind
but
of
it's more
erotica than the
it's more
first one.
it's more sensual. It's more they don't just like in Fahrenheit, they're sort of like talking to each other, and then they're on the bed like having sex. That's the next thing that we see pretty much. Whereas in this, it seems more like they actually have some sort of relationship going on, and it's not like. It seems like it's more serving the purpose of the story.
Well, the kiss don't kiss is actually quite kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You know,
Also, the music makes a difference. I mean, a song about like, I'll see you in Santa
Yeah, that was it.
This is like, sweet lilting piano. It's,
No, to be fair, you know, Heavy Rain's a game I have a lot of problems with, but to give the game credit, it definitely, you know, I mean, it's a joke a lot of times, that kind of like man fiddling with a bra and how difficult that is too. I mean, that is actually a difficult thing to do. So I think that kind of like when you do that in the game, it's kind of like, oh, I nailed it, yeah. I mean, so there's the idea of doing this in, the idea of foreplay as gameplay, it's play, there you go, is kind of a, I just imagine the phrase foreplay design. Anyway, but yeah, that's interesting in terms of like what is interactive, and also this idea of like what is sex too, right? This idea that like sex is also foreplay, sex is also all these other things. But no, that's and that game was M, right?
Yeah.
There's one really interesting thing that came up. I think he was getting at it with use the word sensual. There, you know, how much of what's call it the sexual response to a scene. How much of that is generated by things that you aren't able to measure sort of explicitly by level of nudity? Like if the scene is really well directed and it's really well put together, the musical cues are good, and you know the models are attractive, the amount of sexual response you get out of a viewer, out of a human being, is going to be different. And that's not something that you can necessarily sort of look at and say, well, they've been naked for this amount of time, or they're shown in this position. There's a lot of other elements there that are sort of wrapped up in sort of the emotional side of sexuality that are almost impossible to, you know, slap a metric on.
Sure, absolutely.
To kind of bounce off what he was saying earlier, I think he was trying to get at like, like for Fahrenheit, it seemed like that, you know, it was kind of like, yeah, they were talking and whatever, and it's like, all right, now let's just bump uglies, you know, that's how it was. But in this one, you actually see, like, throughout the game that the characters fall in love. And you're like, oh, okay. Now it's like, you know, telling kids, like, hey, you only have sex unless you're in love.
Yeah, and I feel like I mean, obviously, when most people criticize games, they totally do it out of context, right? It's kind of like, there's one scene in the game where somebody has sex, and, like, if it happens after they're married and after they've known each other for 20 years, you know, they'll leave that out, right, of the criticism, so.
I think, though, that this, like, what they've been talking about and what I've been saying is really important because the idea of, like, romance versus, like, I guess, pornography. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't there, I'm forgetting the technical term for it, but it's, like, whatever the obscenity test is, like, I know it when I see it. The way that, like...
If it appeals to the prurient interest is part of the code of obscenity in most states. Right. If it's solely created to appeal to the prurient interest, that's what we use at the radio station, it's what's used on television.
You mean if you sort of know there's no artistic aspect to it.
Right. It's solely created for titillation purposes.
It's obviously created for this one purpose alone.
Right, and that's how like they differentiate between like is this tasteful tasteful versus non-tasteful.
Yeah.
I think
that's why it's Showtime. That's not porn. There's stories.
Still have to pay for it extra though. Right?
But it's, no. I think you're right. But it's interesting too. Have like because of those laws have been written that way. There's lots of. No, really, like that's why some people put stories into it. That's why, you know, it's kind of like saying, oh no, you know.
Well, I mean,
it's legitimate, like Caligula. Sure.
Yeah. Well, these boards like to pretend that their task is objective because that, you know, that satisfies people, but it's not. It's still people making decisions about content and artful content. So it's just like, you know, it's always going to be subjective. Like there's no way around it. You know, you can count thrusts all you want, but it'll always be someone saying that this is a tasteful sex scene or this is not a tasteful sex scene. I mean, maybe some people find the Heavy Rain.
No, but they do. I mean, but they do. Yeah, I mean, they do actually count those things.
No, yeah.
I mean, but still, it's probably the most tasteful sex scene ever in a computer game. Like, or like there.
What about the one Leisure Suit Larry?
Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah.
No, but there is just a black box. No, but we have to face where computer games are right now, and this is probably the state of the art of. It's probably one of the most like the clearest sex scene in the game, in not a porn game, and there are like not a lot. And we saw it on the catalog. There are about 30 games out there that have sexual content. You know, like it's nothing compared to the rest, which is very interesting. It also appears that sex is very hard to put into a game.
Is that Fable?
Yes.
I remember Fable, yeah, that thing. Yeah. It does have sex.
But I wanted to, just for comparison, so we've been talking about, heterosexual sex mostly. But I just wanted to show that Dragon Age, which of course is a long BioWare RPG, heavy on story, takes dozens and dozens of hours to finish, and then, lots of characters, lots of spoken dialogue. One of the things it does is actually let you choose your gender and also choose who you want to be. So I just wanted to show this too. And this is actually, this is going to be, actually this is spoilers, but whatever.
What is your desire? Again? Again. Oh, is there something in your tent that needs assassinating?
Wow.
And you don't hear what you are saying, unfortunately. It's only on that screen in really small text.
That's quite an offer, especially coming from another man. If we are both speaking of the same thing.
Talking about my tent, man.
And here I thought it might be a Grey Warden thing. Ah, very well.
Unfortunately, there is a... So you can do this with like many different characters. It's like a typical Tolkien-esque game world where you can be a dwarf. So like there's another version where you're like this like really husky dude who's just kind of like it's the exact same scene.
Yeah.
Except with basically the Gimli from Lord of the Rings. And that's it.
It's a lot
Wow.
from the fire.
See?
Did they do that in
I
front of the
knew
knights?
this would happen eventually.
There's just
I
knights
should have
standing.
warned you right from the moment you refused.
Anyway. So that's also an example of a.
Oh, there it is.
Actually, there are repercussions.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, if you
It's
want
not
to see
usually,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, I gotta do it.
You do? Okay.
That's Sean Connery from
Yeah,
Censoring.
it's actually part of the dialogue.
But it's always with a guy.
No, this can be between two women, two men, or a man and a woman.
What was so funny is how this was sort of the way that this was reported in the media. So like when Mass Effect 1 came out, you could have lesbian sex in it. So they were like, you can have lesbian sex. But in this game, they were like, you can have gay male on male sex. Like as if that
dwarf
was
sex,
that
dwarf
was like
sex.
worse.
Interspecies sex. So which one's skinny, which one's whale long?
But you don't interact at all. It's like
No, there's no interactivity.
Usually all beer conditions.
The height question is way on my mind.
Yeah. I would like to be able to solve that height problem, actually, in the gameplay, but unfortunately the game doesn't give you...
They have an expression chance.
Oh.
Oh, they actually kiss. That's actually worth mentioning. Like they touch.
They did in older.
So when you mentioned this I don't remember actually reading about this, but you said this was controversial? Do you remember reading some news about it? Was it
Yeah, I
mainstream
saw
press?
it.
Yeah.
There was mainstream press about both this
And Mass Effect?
yeah, and Mass Effect.
Sex box.
No. Did people talk about like that it was worse because it was lesbians and?
Yeah, no, they were definitely, it was
In
worse
Mass
because it was lesbians, but there was no,
Who said it was worse because it was lesbians?
the, sorry, the media who was reporting it
Yeah.
was
Oh,
sort
but
of
you don't
like,
remember the source though.
Fox News or something
Fox News.
like that. When it was just that what they chose to report with
Yeah.
like the headline
I see.
was lesbian sex, so like, they try and pick out whatever they think is going to shock people the most.
Sure.
So it was lesbian with Mass Effect, and then gay with Dragon Age Origins, because you couldn't have male on male sex in the original Mass Effect.
In Mass Effect, yeah. Can you in 2?
In 2?
No, you can't.
No. It's not a bullet point in the back of the box.
No, actually you can. You can.
You can.
There's a character named Jack. You can have sex with him.
Oh, you can. Okay. Okay. So does this?
Wait,
so,
That's not male on male.
Yeah. No. The girl
It's the girl named Jack.
Right, but And you can make a female, you can have sex with her.
Right. But I thought we were talking about.
We're saying, is there male on male sex in Mass Effect 2? Yes or no?
Yeah, I don't.
I don't think so.
No, there isn't.
Yeah,
Sorry.
because in the future,
Gotta help
there are no
Garrus
gay people,
recalibrate.
but in the fantasy world there are. So, so does this strike you as being very different from? This is also very recent, like Heavy Rain. I mean, does this strike you as being different, or is this about the same, or no?
It's almost like tongue in cheek.
You think this is tongue in cheek?
You saw that.
Now, this is like soap opera level as far as like explicitness goes, right? That you could see this. You could see this on television anytime after 8 p.m. or, you know.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting. This game is this also rated M?
Yeah.
So this is also rated M. In the case of Indigo Prophecy and Heavy Rain, it sounds like, at least from the audience, there was what?
There was interactivity in this game.
There was no interactivity here either. Yeah, so those were both interactive. They were interactive in different ways. But in both of those situations, it sounds like, they were sort of more like, oh, okay, maybe that would get a movie, like an R or something, at least. But it's interesting that for the games rating system, at least the ESRB, this is considered just as bad, right, as what was going on in Heavy Rain, even though you were saying it's something you would see on a soap opera on television.
Well, I mean, it got an M rating, but I assume that's because it had Fountains of War everywhere in it too. So I mean, was the sex and nudity part of it? Did say, oh, explicit, horrible sex, therefore M, or was it like, if it didn't have any violence, would it have gotten a T?
I think there was something about demon tits in Dragon Age Origins.
So there you go.
I forget. I think it's in the Mage's Tower or something. You encounter a new demon.
So no, you're right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows? Because everything gets kind of like dropped into this pot of like what's in the game, right? So it could be like a little.
Part of the interactivity of the difference, they might have a bigger problem with, like, even though in Dragon Age you don't actually like go through the motions of foreplay or what have you, it's not as interactive, you still are initiating it. Like, you are making this conscious decision to have a sexual encounter as a player, and that might be enough for them to consider that an interactive scene.
So that, sure.
Like, you have to bring your character there and choose this option.
So that's more kind of like possibly something you could imitate.
It's like
Real life. So you might be running around, trying to. Poor kids will be running around trying to have sex with elves.
No, but the point is always, if H rating is doing anything, they cannot leave it up to interpretation. So nobody can say, okay, this is how I can read it. They have to have facts. They have to have nudity, or they have to have interactive.
But is there even nudity here?
No, like you never you see half-naked man, and I think almost every game has a half-naked man.
This is like.
Well, what about the female characters?
They're still wearing something, I think, if I remember correctly. They're wearing.
No, exactly. And you know what else is funny about the sex scenes in this game? But like, they're never nude. It's like they're always in their underwear. So I'm just they're like miming sex. It's really weird.
Well, it's funny too. None of the dialogue explicitly becomes about sex. So if you didn't actually know how, innuendo, if you didn't know how to like side talk your way into a sexual encounter, you'd either stumble upon it or you wouldn't even encounter it.
In other words, if you hadn't seen that scene, you wouldn't have been like, oh, I bet they had sex. You would have been like, what were they talking about?